Just wondering if obviously after giving such a good performance against Josh Taylor, not getting the victory that was rightfully his, I'm just wondering if Catterall can psychologically recover from getting robbed the way he did against Josh Taylor. I personally thought that Jack Catterell won that fight when he fought Josh Taylor. I thought it was a clear victory, in my opinion, for Jack Catterell, and I think the only reason why, there's several reasons why, but the main reason why he didn't get that decision was because the fight was in Scotland. You can see this happen several times in boxing. When Amir Khan fought Lamont Peterson in Washington DC, even though in my opinion and a lot of people watching, Amir Khan won that fight, for some reason, because it was in Washington DC, which is actually Lamont Peterson's hometown. Amir Khan, for whatever reason, lost that fight on the cards. The same thing happened to Jack Catterall. Jack Catterall, if put it like this, if Josh Taylor did what Jack Catterall did in that fight, then Josh Taylor would have won that fight, even though it's the complete opposite way round. Jack Catterall completely outboxed Josh Taylor, but in my mind I'm just thinking, obviously he should have got that victory and he should be the undisputed champion of the world right now. I'm just thinking from a psychological point of view, would Jack Catterall actually recover from this quote-unquote loss to Josh Taylor? Because the fact is, psychologically it takes a lot out of you when you train so hard and you put so much into a fight, and then you put off one of the best performances of your career. And for him at that time, for Jack Catterall, the Josh Taylor fight was the biggest fight of his life. Like, in terms of his professional career, probably in his life in general, it was the biggest stage that he was ever going to be on, fighting for all of them titles in your opponent's backyard, and giving that masterclass performance that he gave. I mean, he did everything that he possibly could have done to do it right. He knocked him down. He done everything he could have done, and he still didn't get the decision. And you see, with a lot of fighters, after they get robbed in that type of way, it leaves such a bitter taste in their mouth that they never come back into the sport again. Like, psychologically, even if they don't physically retire from the sport, they're never the same. I mean, look at Dominic Reyes. After he gave such a great performance against John Jones, since that fight, he should have got that victory, in my opinion. In my opinion, I think he won that fight against John Jones, but he got robbed horribly. Since that, he's not been the same. I mean, he's lost his last 3-4 fights quite brutally as well. I mean, I think his last loss was against Jiri Prohaska. I mean, he got knocked out with a spinning elbow. And don't get it twisted, he still had his moments in that fight. Even Jiri said that he got buzzed in that fight. But I don't think Dominic Reyes is the same. I mean, psychologically, when you put so much into something and then you don't get the victory, I think from a subconscious point of view, you think, what's the point? What's the point of me putting myself through all this pain and sacrifice and whatever fighters do in the training camps to give them that edge? What's the point of me doing that if I'm not going to get the victory anyway? So I don't think it's likely that the decision is going to be overturned. I mean, robberies have happened in boxing for a very long time. I mean, put it from this perspective, right? The Oscar De La Hoya versus Felix Trinidad fight. Everyone thinks that Oscar De La Hoya won that fight, apart from the 3 judges that scored it for Trinidad. Now, that fight was a much more high-profile fight than the fight between Josh Taylor versus Catterall. Yet, if a fight of that level never got overturned in terms of the decision, like they never rescored the fight and gave it to De La Hoya. So, what do you think is the likelihood that they're going to do with this? It's just not going to happen. There's many reasons why I think this is. It's because Jack Catterall at that time was an unknown fighter. He just was. I mean, not that many people in the UK even knew about him. I personally knew about him because I do follow boxing, and I knew about Jack Catterall, and I knew he was a top fighter, and he's a fighter that you can't sleep on. But generally speaking, before that event, not that many people knew about him. Right, Josh Taylor was the money guy. I mean, this is the guy that was going to go up to 147 and fight Terence Crawford. And obviously, Josh Taylor signed with Bob Arum, and he signed with several promotional entities that are quite powerful within the sport. So they needed him to win that night. By hook or by crook, they needed him to win that night. So I'm just thinking, psychologically, if Jack Catterall's ever going to be the same again. It happens with a lot of fighters when they get robbed so horribly. Psychologically, they can never seem to recover again. because I think for him that was the fight of his life, and he performed, and he put on such a great performance. But then for him not to get the decision, I mean, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. So yeah, that's just my opinion. Tell me your opinion. Do you think Jack Catterall can psychologically recover from getting robbed the way he did in the Josh Taylor fight, or do you think he could be damaged forever? It happens to a lot of fighters. They get robbed blind, and then they're never the same. They never put in the same effort when it comes to training camp. They never have that same fire and grind in their eye, because they feel like psychologically, from a point of view, they think, what's the point? I put all this effort in and then I don't get the victory. I mean, what's the point of me doing it again? I'm just not going to get the victory. They kind of go for a phase of depression where they're never quite the same. I mean, I could give another example, the Meldrick Taylor fight. Now, obviously, that fight, Meldrick Taylor put on a hell of a performance against Chavez at that time, who was undefeated. And to be fair, he did get knocked down, but when a ref waved off the fight and he had only 2 seconds left until victory, after that fight he was never the same. Like, he was still a world-class fighter, he still managed to win a world title, but he was never quite what he once was back then. And obviously he took a physical beating in that fight that many fighters don't recover from, but to some extent I think it was more psychological. Like, he did everything right in that fight until the last 10 seconds when he got knocked down. Don't get it twisted, he was getting caught with shots before, but he was outboxing Chavez. But then when the ref waved off the fight, I think that was it. That was when psychologically he was just never the same again. And I think it happens with fighters because they put so much into a fight, they put so much into a training camp, and then when they don't get the victory, it gets snatched from them. It's very difficult for them to recover psychologically from that. There are great fighters that have done in the past. I mean, look at Pernell Whitaker. I mean, he got robbed blind against Chavez, but then he went on to have a great career. He still had a great career before that, but he kept fighting. I mean, and then he got robbed again against De La Hoya, arguably, but he just kept going. There are fighters that are very strong mentally that recover from that, but I think they're the elite fighters that can actually recover from that mentally. A lot of fighters can't. I'm just wondering if Jack Catterall's one of them fighters that I hope he can mentally recover and fight again for the light welterweight titles. It's not going to be the same because all the titles are going to be scattered now. If Josh Taylor does not go back to 140 and just goes up to 147, all the titles are going to be vacant, and he's going to have to get all the titles again. And basically that opportunity that he had of winning all the titles that one night, I think that's gone forever. And that's why I think psychologically it's very difficult to recover from something like that. But tell me your thoughts below. What do you think about this? Do you think I'm reaching a bit? Do you think Jack Catterall's going to recover? Or do you think in a weird way he might be damaged forever? Because when stuff like this happens, it leaves a bitter taste in your mouth for the sport. You love the sport, you give it everything you can, but then you don't get the victory because of corruption, or in your mind you getting robbed, and it takes something out of you. It takes something out of you from a psychological point of view. I mean, some fighters are never the same ever again, and I'm scared that's gonna be what happens to Jack Catterall, and it's a shame because he should have got that victory. But yeah, that's my opinion. Tell me your opinion below, and like and subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot more content coming for you. Peace out.